3:17 in the morning, local time, on a moonless August night in the northwestern Black Sea. A 5.5-meter unmanned surface vessel is moving at 22 knots, its bow trimmed low, its diesel signature masked by the chop. On a screen in a basement room in Odessa, an operator watches a green thermal frame. Inside the frame, 800 meters ahead, sits the heat bloom of a Russian Raptor-class patrol boat. The seeker is locked. The operator's right hand hovers over a single physical button labeled, in Ukrainian consent. He waits 4 seconds, then he presses it. The question this investigation answers is not whether the strike happened, the wreck was towed at dawn. The question is why. 20 months later, the Russian Ministry of Defense has never used the word Raptor in any official statement about that night. Retention_checkpoint, 030 hook resolution tease. This video covers 3 things. The 4 minutes 38 seconds of thermal video Russia tried to suppress, the seeker logic that found a stern exhaust pipe at 800 meters, and the harbor dispatch log from Sevastopol. Read here in English for the first time, that names the vessel, the tug, and the dawn hour at which a Russian Project 03160 patrol boat was pulled out of the water with a hole through its starboard quarter. The footage has been verified against AIS gaps, against Planet Labs SkySat 12 imagery from the following morning, and against an intercepted Fleet Channel transmission timestamped 3:24 local. Each piece of evidence has a chain of custody. Where the chain breaks, we will say so. The strategic frame, briefly. By the summer of 2024, the Russian Black Sea Fleet had already lost its flagship, 2 Raptor-class landing ships, the patrol corvette Sergei Kotov, and, by various OSINT counts, somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of its operational surface combatants. The fleet's headquarters had effectively withdrawn from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk. What remained at sea on the Crimean side was a thinning screen of smaller hulls, Project 03160 Raptors, Mangus-class patrol boats, the occasional Karakut corvette pushed forward for missile launches. Those Raptors were doing the work the larger ships could no longer risk. They patrolled the approaches to Sevastopol, escorted minesweepers, and, on quieter nights, ran what Russian crews called the Eastern Arc, a slow loop between Cape Tuckenkut and the Tendra Spit, listening for unmanned surface vessels coming out of Odessa Oblast. This is the loop the Raptor was running on the night in question, 12 nautical miles south of Cape Tuckenkut, on a bearing the Ukrainian Navy had logged for 19 consecutive evenings. That regularity, 3 Ukrainian Navy officers later told the journalist Yuri Butusov in on-the-record interviews, was the planning error that made the engagement possible. A patrol that runs the same arc 19 nights in a row is not a patrol anymore, it is a schedule. The unit that built the operation is Group 13, the unmanned surface vessel cell of Ukraine's main Directorate of Intelligence, the HUR. Group 13 has been publicly named by the HUR since the strike on the Sergei Kotov in September 2023, and its existence is now part of the open record. What is not in the open record, and what we are not going to invent here, are the names of the operators. They are still serving. We will refer to the man on the consent button by the call sign the HUR briefing later released, Khimik. The radio operator beside him, who handled the data link, has never been named publicly. We will call him only the second operator. Khimik's MAGURA V5 is not, in 2024, the fragile first-generation drone that swarmed the Crimean Bridge in July 2023. It is a maturing weapon, 5.5 meters, fiberglass hull, twin water jet propulsion derived from a commercial jet ski platform, a top speed in the high 40s, a cruise speed of around 22 knots, and a payload bay rated, by the manufacturer's own published specifications, for warheads up to 320 kilograms. The variant that left the Odessa coast that night carried a shape-charge warhead, configured for a waterline impact against thin steel. We will come back to the warhead. The fragment recovered 3 days later from a beach near Yevpatoria is the reason this investigation can name the variant at all. I spent 2 weeks going through the public MAGURA V5 specification sheets, the leaked procurement notes, the recovered fragment photographs that the OSINT analyst H.I. Sutton, who writes under the handle at Covert Shores, published on August 5, 2024. One detail kept nagging at me: the seeker, Almost every English-language news report on Magura strikes refers, in passing, to a thermal camera. None of them say what the camera actually does. The camera, in the V5 variant active in mid-2024, is a FLIR boson core, a 640 by 512 pixel uncooled microbolometer, the same family of sensors sold for commercial security and small UAVs. It is not a missile seeker in the traditional sense. It does not, on its own, guide the drone to a target. It sends a thermal video feedback over a Starlink-routed data link to the operator, who flies the final approach by hand. The lock you will hear me describe is a software-assisted track box. The trigger is human. That distinction matters, because it explains the 4-second pause before Kimmich presses consent. Here's the part that doesn't make sense on the surface. A diesel-engined patrol boat, on a calm sea, at 3 in the morning, in a fleet that knows Ukraine has been hunting it for 15 months, should not be visible. It should be running dark. It should be zigzagging. It should not be on a 19-night repeating arc, and yet it was. 3 explanations have circulated in the OSINT community. The first, advanced by a former NATO USV engineer interviewed by the Warzone in November 2024, is that the Raptor crew believed their thermal signature was being masked by sea clutter on Ukrainian shore-based radars. They were partly right. They were not being tracked by radar. They were being tracked by a Ukrainian Bayraktar TB2 operating at 5,500 meters, 23 minutes north of their position, and by a passive ESM listening station near Ochakiv that had identified their navigational radar emitter weeks earlier. The second explanation is fatigue. The Raptor had been at sea for 16 hours. The third, less charitable, is the one Russian naval bloggers themselves raised in the days after the strike, that the patrol commander had simply stopped believing the Ukrainians could reach that far out. Retention_checkpoint, 4 o'clock Stakes Bend. The Raptor was visible because the planners assumed it couldn't be seen. Bottom of this. That last assumption is the one that breaks, because the Magura V5 that found them did not launch from Odessa harbor. It launched from a small commercial slip on the Tylihol estuary, roughly 48 kilometers east of Odessa, on a transit profile that had been rehearsed 3 times in the preceding fortnight. The transit profile is the second piece of the planning we now know about. Group 13 had been losing drones. 2 Magura V5S had failed in the 6 weeks before the August engagement, one to a Russian Ki-29 helicopter that intercepted it 60 kilometers off the Crimean coast on June 19, 2024. The other to what the HARES after-action notes describe in a partial document leaked to the Kyiv-based outlet Defense Express as a mid-route data link failure of unknown origin. 2 losses out of 7 attempts is a kill chain in trouble. The August operation was, internally, a test of a revised approach, a slower, longer, lower signature run, with the data link routed through a Starlink terminal mounted aft of the warhead, in a recessed well to keep the antenna's heat signature below the gunwale. The AOR will not confirm any of those details on the record. The leak to Defense Express is, by their own labeling, single source, partially redacted. We are telling you this because the rest of the evidence, the FLIR feed, the harbor log, the fragment, is solid, and we want you to know exactly where the floor of the evidence is. The plan, according to the after-action briefing the HAOR partially declassified in October 24, called for 3 Magura V5S. 2 were decoys. They would push due south from the Odessa coast on a high throttle profile, lighting up Russian ESM coverage and pulling whatever airborne assets were available toward a position roughly 40 kilometers west of the actual strike zone. The third Magura, Kimmich, would loop east and approach the Cape Tarkankot arc from a bearing the Russians did not expect, almost due north from the seaward side of the Tundra Spit, threading between 2 fishing buoys whose positions Group 13 had been logging since June. The first setback came at 23:40 on the previous evening. One of the 2 decoys lost its data link 41 minutes after launch and was deliberately scuttled by remote command, sunk in deep water rather than risk capture. That left 1 decoy. Group 13's operations officer, in the partial transcript Defense Express published, can be heard asking whether the operation should be aborted. The answer, attributed to a senior officer identified only by the callsign director, is recorded in the transcript as a single word, in Ukrainian. Продовжуємо. We continue. The second setback came 40 minutes later, at 0:21. The Russian patrol arc, which had been a clockwork loop for 19 nights, deviated. The Raptor turned south-southwest, away from Cape Tarkankut, and began a slower transit toward what looked, on the Ukrainian plot, like a rendezvous with a second vessel. For roughly 23 minutes, Kamak's Magura V5 had no target. The decoy was burning fuel 40 kilometers to the west. The clock was the enemy. At 0:44, the Raptor resumed its old arc. We do not know why. There is no Russian side document that explains the deviation. The most plausible OSINT reading, offered by the analyst Defmon on August 4, 2024, is that the Raptor briefly responded to a false sonar contact reported by a minesweeper operating further south, and then was recalled. It is a reading. It is not a confirmation. What happens next, we can show you in tighter resolution, because the FLIR feed itself becomes the document. At 2:51 local, Kimik's Magura V5 is 12 kilometers north of the Raptor, holding station behind a low swell line, throttled down to 7 knots. The thermal feed at this point is wide angle. The FLIR boson set to its broader field of view. The Raptor appears as a faint horizontal smudge, hotter at the stern, where 2 MTU diesels are pushing roughly 3,600 horsepower through twin propellers. The smudge is what the seeker will eventually lock onto. The exhaust plume is the brightest single point on the surface of the sea for 10 nautical miles in any direction. It is also, crucially, behind the vessel. A shaped charge warhead detonating beneath an exhaust plume is a warhead detonating beneath the engine room. Kimik does not need to see the rest of the boat. He only needs to see the heat. At 2:58, the second operator brings the data link up to full bandwidth and switches the seeker into narrow field of view. The Raptor fills the lower third of the frame. You can now count silhouettes on the foredeck. There are 2. One is standing aft of the forward machine gun mount, leaning on the railing. The other is amidships, partly obscured by the superstructure. Neither moves with any urgency. There is no indication in the feed that the Raptor's crew is aware of anything on the water behind them. Their navigational radar, according to the ESM intercepts from Ochakiv, is sweeping forward and to port. The Magura V5 is approaching from astern and slightly to starboard, in the radar's blind quarter. At 3:13, range 1100 meters, the Magura accelerates, 22 knots. The FLIR feed begins to shake, not from the speed, but from the wave impacts. The seeker auto-stabilization holds the track box on the Raptor's stern. At 3:15, range 900 meters, the operator overlays the consent reticle. At 3:16, range 820 meters, the track box turns from white to red. This is the system telling Kimik that the seeker has a high confidence lock and that the warhead arming sequence has completed. The consent button is now live. He waits 4 seconds. The 4 seconds are the human in the loop. They are also, the former NATO USV engineer told the Warzone, the single most important design choice in the Magura V5 program. Without those 4 seconds, every false thermal contact, a flare, a fishing boat, a hot life raft, becomes a kinetic event. With those 4 seconds, an operator who has been awake for 14 hours has time to look at the silhouette, count the masts, see the gun mount, see the wake, and decide. At 3 hours 17 minutes and 4 seconds, Kimik presses consent. The Magura V5 does not deviate. It does not maneuver. It runs straight at the heat. The thermal feed runs 4 minutes 38 seconds from the moment the seeker first acquired the Raptor to the frame that goes white. The final visible frame, at 3 hours 17 minutes and 46 seconds, shows the Magura crossing inside 100 meters. The frame after that is washed out, the sensor saturated by the detonation. The data link drops 2 seconds later. The antenna is gone with the rest of the bow. Kimik's screen, by all accounts of operators who have been through this moment, simply turns blue. There was a pause in the Odessa room. The transcript leaked to Defense Express records 7 seconds of silence on the operations channel. Then a voice, not Kimik, says, in Ukrainian, a single word that translates, awkwardly in English, as something between confirmed and clean. The room exhales. 2 minutes later, the ESM station at Ochakiv intercepts a Russian fleet channel transmission at 3:24 local. The transmission is in the clear. The Russian voice, partially recovered by Astra's open-source intercept project, and later verified by Bellingcat's audio analyst Charlotte Maher, is asking, 3 times in succession, for a damage report from a call sign that Russian telegram channels later identified as belonging to the patrol boat in question. There is no answer on the recording. 3 Ukrainian Navy press briefings between August 2nd and August 7th, 2024, referred to a successful engagement against a Russian patrol vessel in the northwestern Black Sea. None of them named the vessel. The Russian Ministry of Defense did not acknowledge the strike. On August 3rd, the Russian telegram channel Rybar, which has consistent ties to the Russian defense establishment and is one of the most read mill blogs in Russia, published a short statement describing a small boat exercise in the area with no losses. That statement is the Russian government's only on-the-record reference to that night. It is unverified, no independent confirmation of an exercise has ever surfaced, and it conflicts with the next piece of evidence, retention_checkpoint. Approximately 13 o'clock microfinal plus cliffhanger. The FLIR feed was the first document. The intercept was the second. The third is a 1-page harbor dispatch sheet from the Sevastopol South Bay tug pool, dated August 1st, 2024, leaked in late October 2024 to the Ukrainian investigative outlet Info, and subsequently authenticated, in part, by Bellingcat. The sheet logs the dispatch of a port tug, the SB 742, at 5:48 local on August 1st, with a tow assignment to a Project 03160 patrol vessel at a position roughly 43 kilometers northwest of Cape Tarkankut. The vessel's hull number is on the sheet. We are not publishing it because the public record on the Raptor variants in service at Sevastopol that summer is incomplete enough that naming the hull would imply a level of certainty we don't have. What we can say is that the sheet describes the casualty as flooding aft, starboard side, engine room compartment, and that a separate column logs 2 crew evacuated by a Ka-27 helicopter at 4:55. 2 evacuated. The Raptor crew complement is typically 6 to 8. The sheet does not account for the others. The Russian Ministry of Defense has never published a casualty list for August 1st, 2024. The names of the missing, if there are missing, are not in the public record. The case had its first major piece of physical evidence 3 days later. On August 4th, 2024, a fragment of a curved fiberglass casing, roughly the size of a dinner plate, washed up on a beach near Yevpatoria. A Russian beachgoer photographed it, posted the photograph to VK, and then, by his own later account, was visited within 12 hours by men who did not identify themselves and who took the fragment away. The photograph survived. Hi. Sutton, at Covert Shores, geolocated the beach, compared the curvature and the embedded fitting points of the fragment to the published MAGURA V5 payload bay covers, and concluded, on August 5th, that the fragment was, with high confidence, from the warhead housing of a MAGURA V5. A small bracket visible in one corner of the photograph, a stainless steel fitting with a specific bolt pattern, matches a bracket that, in the MAGURA V5 manufacturer's own published cutaway diagram, secures the shaped charge liner. That bracket is the reason this investigation can say shaped charge and not explosive payload of unspecified type. It is also the reason we can rule out the alternative theory, briefly floated by Russian mill bloggers in early August 2024, that the patrol boat had struck a drifting sea mine. What strikes us about this case is how brittle the cover-up turned out to be. 3 documents, 1 tug sheet, 1 photograph of a fragment, 1 open-channel radio transcript were enough, between them, to unravel a denial the Russian Ministry of Defense had built on silence. The silence was the strategy. Russia did not contest the Ukrainian Navy's claim. It simply refused to engage with it. 20 years ago, in a different information environment, that might have worked. Now every harbor has a phone in every pocket, and every beach is a satellite pass. Silence is not concealment. It is delay. Here is the take that will probably get us flack. The MAGURA V5 program, in its 2024 form, is not the precision weapon its press treatment makes it out to be. The 2 losses before the August strike, the deliberate scuttling of a decoy, the 23 minutes of lost track when the Raptor deviated, these are the realities of a maturing system, not a finished one. What the program does well is exploit a specific Russian failure, the failure to update routine. The Cape Tarkankut arc was not defeated by superior technology. It was defeated by a planning culture that did not adjust to its own losses. The MAGURA V5 is the tool. The opening was the mistake. If you take only one thing from this investigation, it should be that the most consequential Ukrainian naval weapon of the war is, in operational terms, less impressive than the gap in Russian seamanship that it was built to slip through. Retention _ checkpoint, tilde 50% mid-roll hook, plus controversial take, plus viewer question. Why not eat what? What do you think? Was the August 1st engagement a Ukrainian innovation or a Russian self-inflicted wound? We're not asking rhetorically. The naval analysts we trust most have split on this question for over a year. There is a smaller mystery in this case that we have not closed yet. We are going to close it now. Earlier we said that the Raptor's radar, according to the Ochakiv ESM intercepts, was sweeping forward and to port. The blind quarter, astern and to starboard, was the corridor the MAGURA V5 used. That blind quarter is not a design feature of the Project 03160 Raptor. It is an operational choice. The Raptor's positive MK radar, in its standard installation, has a full 360-degree sweep. So why was it not sweeping astern? The answer, raised in a single line of the Defense Express leak and corroborated by a Russian-language naval forum post from late August 2024, appears to be that the radar had been configured for forward sector surveillance to support a planned escort of a minesweeper that had been called off earlier in the evening. The radar configuration was not updated when the mission changed. It is a small thing. It is the kind of thing that, in retrospect, decides engagements. The intercepted Russian transmission at 3:24, the one asking 3 times for a damage report, was almost certainly being made by a vessel whose radar had not seen the MAGURA V5 because the radar had not been told to look astern. One detail that stuck with me from the leaked operations transcript is the silence after Kimmich pressed consent. The room in Odessa did not cheer. It did not even speak for 7 seconds. The man who described the moment to Yuri Butusov on background said the silence had a texture to it. The same texture, he said, as the silence after an artillery battery fires a registered round and waits to hear from the spotter. Not triumph, calculation. Operators wait for the spotter, because until the spotter calls, the round is still in the air. The MAGURA V5, on a 4-minute 38-second run, was still in the air for the operators long after it had hit the water. The forensic aftermath, beyond the documents, has been thinner than OSINT analysts hoped. Russia did not publish a casualty list. The SB-742 tug returned to Sevastopol South Bay at 11:30 local on August 1st, with the Raptor under tow, according to 2 Russian-language telegram channels in Sevastopol that posted blurry phone camera footage of a damaged hull entering the bay that morning. Those videos were taken down within 48 hours. The Ukrainian Navy has not released a higher resolution version of the FLIR feed than the 4-minute 38-second segment we have described. The FLIR has acknowledged the strike in general terms in 3 subsequent press conferences, but has not publicly named the patrol vessel. As of this reporting, in May 2026, no Russian court-martial, no Russian fleet inquiry, and no Russian public commission has examined the loss of the patrol boat described in the Sevastopol harbor sheet. The strategic consequence of August 1st, 2024 is harder to read. It is one strike in a war that has now seen more than 30 publicly documented USV engagements in the Black Sea. By itself, it did not change the strategic balance. The Black Sea Fleet was already withdrawing from Sevastopol. The Raptors were already the most expendable hulls on the patrol roster. What the engagement did do, in the months that followed, was force the Russian Black Sea Fleet to issue a set of revised standing orders, dated September 9, 2024, partially leaked, again to Slitstva Info, in January 2025, that mandated full 360-degree radar coverage on all patrol assets in the Crimean approaches, and that prohibited repeating patrol arcs of more than 3 consecutive nights without route variation. Those orders are, in effect, an admission. They are the closest thing to a Russian acknowledgement of the Cape Tarkankut engagement that the public record contains. We cut one piece of this story for length, a second intercept, recorded by the Ochakiv ESM station at 4:11 local on August 1st. captured what sounds, to multiple Russian-speaking analysts who have listened to it on the Astra channel, like a fleet duty officer in Sevastopol, giving instructions to a Russian press attaché. Instructions that include the phrase, "Do not use the word Raptor." We did not include this in the main investigation because the recording's chain of custody is weaker than the rest of the evidence in this file. Astra published it. Bellingcat has not, to our knowledge, independently verified the voice. The phrase, "if real," would explain the 20-month silence we opened this video with. We are flagging it, not asserting it. If you have heard a longer, cleaner version of this intercept, or if you have seen the Russian press attaché in question identified anywhere in the public record, drop a comment. We read every one. The retention_checkpoint till the last 60s payoff, plus open loop toward related video. So, the wreck was towed, the crew was, in part, evacuated, the fragment washed up, the harbor log was leaked, the intercept was archived, the shape charge bracket was matched. The 4-minute 38-second FLIR feed, frame by frame, holds up to every cross-reference we have been able to put to it. The single most consequential fact in this entire reconstruction is not, in the end, the strike itself. It is that the strike was made possible by a 19-night patrol arc, a radar configured the wrong way, and the assumption that the war's pattern was set. The MAGURA V5 is a tool that finds those assumptions and exposes them. There will be more nights like August 1st. There will also by now be Russian commanders who have read the September 9th standing orders and adjusted. The investigation continues. If you want to see how it continues, the Kerch Bridge strike, the Sea Baby program that ran in parallel to MAGURA, the operators who train in a basement in Odessa under call signs we are still piecing together. There is a related video pinned in the comments. Subscribe to Pershui. We will be here when the next document leaks.